Welcome back to the Legacy Radio Network. You're listening to Everything Financial Radio. We have the pleasure today of talking once again with Mr. Karl Denninger. Karl's blog can be read daily at market-ticker.org. I'd encourage you to check that out. Karl, as I mentioned in the last segment, Michigan is now a right-to-work state. And when you take a look at some of the reactions that were just downright violent and state legislators saying there will be blood, is this given where the economy's going? First, give me your take on this, but is this a preview of what we're going to see in other states as well?
Oh, I wouldn't be surprised. You know, Michigan has a long history of unions abusing businesses. There was a time when unions were necessary because, of course, businesses had this terrible habit 100 years ago of abusing people. And so the idea that that there was never a need for this is just not true. But we've gone too far down the other road, and the problem with labor unions in general isn't so much that people have the right to organize, because they do. It's part of the First Amendment. You have the right to to petition your government. You have the right to petition individuals. You have the right to assemble and speak your mind. The problem is that the rights are not equally balanced on the other side, and what the law change in Michigan has done is balance those rights. So I don't see any problem with people organizing into a labor union if they want to, bargain collectively. But management should have the right to fire you collectively as well if they wish to do so. Of course, that's very disruptive to their operations. So they would not do it except in extreme circumstances. But then again, striking is a rather extreme circumstance too, isn't it? I mean, if you're going to withhold your work, that should be for extreme reasons as well. And what the labor unions don't like is the fact that now they cannot force you to be a member and contribute to political causes that you may not agree with in order to work in a given shop. Closed shops were outlawed many, many years ago, but the union shop, where you had to pay dues regardless of whether or not you wanted to or not, was just a way around the closed shop law being made illegal. And so this is the kind of thing, though, that Michigan wants to. The labor unions want to claim, well, this is all bad for people, but I think we just have to look at the state of labor and the state of the job market in Michigan. The state has been losing workers and losing well-paying manufacturing jobs now for 3 decades, and it is in large part because of their stance on labor. And they're now taking steps to address this, and hopefully it will lead to a better economic environment for the people of Michigan.
Karl, let's talk about the economy, because here we have a new year before us. People tend to be optimistic around the first part of the year. They're going to change things, New Year's resolutions, but when you look at what's going on economically speaking around the world, the forecast can't be terrific. Let's start with Europe. Greece seems to be in a full-blown deflationary depression. You've got Spain not far behind. Will this be the year that we see the euro fail as a currency, at least in its current form?
I would not be surprised. I expected that we would have an exit, or at least an incipient exit, this last year. It was one of my predictions. But I did hedge it and said that while the cracks will be evident, is not necessarily the case that the actual failure will occur in 2012. I think that's one of the predictions that I made that I have to give myself a hit on, although my record this last year was not all that great. It's simply a matter of timing, is that governments tend to try to hold things together until the last breath, and they've done a fairly decent job in Europe. But they're not getting it from a standpoint of economic progress. And part of the problem we have, both in this country and in Europe, is that we believe in the exponential growth tooth fairy, that this kind of thing will never come to an end, that exponential growth can go on, that is compounded growth, annualized growth, can go on forever. And that is a fraud in each and every case. It is not possible. And the sooner people come to understand this, that it is never possible under any set of circumstances with an indefinite forward time horizon, the better off we'll be. So I believe that the date is approaching when the European experiment, if you will have to be renegotiated. And I only hope that renegotiation happens peacefully, because Europe, as I'm sure everyone is aware, has had a couple of instances in the last century where that renegotiation has not happened peacefully. So let's hope that we don't have the outbreak of violence to go along with everything else.
Karl, what effect will Europe ultimately have on the U.S. economy, and more importantly, U.S. citizens that are maybe trying to protect a nest egg or accumulate a nest egg?
Europe's incipient issues, which have now been in the news and going on now for 3+ years, really started getting kicked off in the news cycle with our housing bubble collapse. In fact, go all the way back to the founding of the European Union, and there were people at the time that said that this is an unstable situation because it is inherently a transfer payment system without a unified government. Unfortunately, what you have is the second largest market for goods and services is the European Union. Okay, we're the largest by a consolidated area. They're second largest, and so the idea that this will somehow remain contained and won't bleed over throughout the world is just lunacy. It absolutely has, and it absolutely will continue to do so. I think that people need to be very careful here because the European equity markets in particular, many of them are at or near highs. They've gone through, the DAX, for example, is at multi-year highs. All of these indices are at multi-year highs. And yet they haven't addressed any of the real problems that face these areas of the world. We need to look for where is economic balance being restored. And surprisingly enough, the prime place where you'll find it, where it is actually starting to come back into the fore, believe it or not, is Iceland. And that's because they told the bankers to take a hike, and yet this is not being talked about at all. Of course, it's a tiny little economy, and there isn't really much that you could do in terms of investing there in a productive fashion to hedge a portfolio or whatever have you, just because it's not big enough, it's not liquid enough. But in terms of a path forward, look there, because there is a nation that actually took on the problem, and while they went through a terrible adjustment, they're now starting to come out the other side, and things are not looking so bad there.
Karl, I think that's an interesting example. Compare and contrast, if you would, current Federal Reserve policies with maybe what the policy fix was in Iceland.
Well, the Federal Reserve seems to believe, along with the European Central Bank, and now we've got the same thing coming from Japan, okay, with the recent elections, that all you have to do is make credit cheaper and pour more currency into the system, and by doing so, you will spur economic recovery. But the truth is it doesn't work like that, because all you're doing is financing government deficit spending. And so what actually occurs in the economy is that you increase the denominator, the number of units of currency and credit that are available to buy goods and services, and that is inflation by the traditional definition. And everyone thinks this is not going to be such a terrible thing. 2% inflation will be okay or whatever have you. But the problem is that wages don't go up, and so your purchasing power, which is all that matters at the end of the day, it's the number of gallons of gasoline you can buy with the money that you have, not how many dollars a gallon costs, goes down. And as your purchasing power declines, your real standard of living declines, and that is what matters to the people. That is what powers an economy. It is what provides the excess economic capacity to innovate, to build jobs, to start new businesses, to become an economic powerhouse and maintain that. And so we are seeing that systematically destroyed. Iceland, on the other hand, said, those of you that are bankers, too bad, you made bad bets, you chew, and oops, if you can't swallow, you choke. Okay? And then on top of that, they turned around, they actually arrested some people who were involved in some of the frauds that were going on, marketing things that they knew were bogus and could not possibly be paid and were telling people were good investments. They chased a lot of these people out of the country. Their currency underwent a tremendous devaluation, but at the same time, as you realigned this against what they had internally, wages adjusted as well. And so the people went through a very difficult time, but realize that when you live beyond your means, there is no way out without you accepting the fact that you did that and that there is pain that you personally must take along with everybody else. There isn't any way out of that box. We can keep pretending. The longer we do it, the worse the problem becomes and the more severe the pain is. They took it relatively early and relatively hard, and as a result, they're now coming through the other side, and the people in the economy are recovering.
Karl, I want to shift gears here a minute because there was an article that caught my eye. You probably saw it. It was, ironically, on CNBC, and it was an article that was a bit detrimental to Obamacare, stating that the tax hikes might just be getting started. And the article talked about the fact that if the value of job-based health insurance were taxed like regular income, and currently health insurance is a tax-free benefit, it raised about $150 billion. And it seems like this is something that Congress is actually kicking around. And certainly when you take a look at how expensive Obamacare will be, what effect will these increased taxes and the implementation of Obamacare have on the economy?
It's going to destroy what's left. The biggest problem we have in this country is that we refuse to accept where the real problem lies within our budget, both from a federal perspective and privately, and that is an explosive growth of cost of medical care. And that growth in cost is all laid off on other people's feet. It's, well, we have new technology, technology's expensive, yada, yada, yada. You know what? I have a four-headed computer sitting on my desk that does video processing. I use it for trading. I watch movies on it. I do all kinds of things. 5 years ago, you couldn't buy that piece of computer equipment for any amount of money. 2 years ago, it would have cost tens of thousands of dollars. Today, I can go out and I can replicate it for a couple of grand. Technology becomes cheaper over time. We all know this. We have cell phones that are more powerful than computers were 4 or 5 years ago. And so you have to ask yourself, why do we have this problem with medical cost increases that are, 3, 4, 5, 10 times the rate of inflation? And the answer is, our government has granted monopoly status to healthcare providers, both the actual providers of services and also the goods and service providers that make those things, the pharmaceutical industry, the device industry. All of these things have become protected monopolies and protected closed markets at the behest of these firms who lobby the government and then get laws passed to make that so. As a result, you are paying 5 times as much as you should be for common medical procedures, and then when you can't afford it, you scream for the government to come in and help you. Well, government's more than happy to come, so-called, help you, right? In the process, they rob you. So we have to address this problem, but nobody will take this on. You're not hearing this from the Democrats, the Republicans, the Libertarians. You're not hearing from anybody. I've been writing about it for 5 years because when you look at it analytically, this is where the problem is. Obamacare is ultimately going to force a collapse of the private health delivery system in this country because it takes what little is left of market signals out of the system, and when that happens, you will end up with single payer, much like Canada. The system will come apart, and then we're going to really find out how bad it can get.
Well, Karl, we sure appreciate you being on the program. We are out of time for today, but we hope you'll come back.
You bet.
All right. Everything Financial Radio will return after these words. Stay with us.